Welcome to the 45th annual meeting of the Nantucket Land Council. It's a pleasure to see everyone here today. Sadly, I would like to take this opportunity to report the passing of one of our Land Council's longstanding board members, Jean Haffenreffer. Jean was on the board for over 20 years, proudly serving the organization and continuing her late husband Frederick's legacy of conservation on the island. She will be deeply missed. May we please have a moment of silence for Jean. Thank you. The meeting will come to order. During the past year, we've had some changes at the Land Council. Cormac Collier, our Executive Director for 15 years, stepped down to take the position of President and CEO of the Conservation Foundation. Cormac, you see here? Oh, anyway, congratulations, and thank you for your years at the Land Council. We look forward to working closely with you and the Conservation Foundation as we continue our work of planning, protecting, and preserving this beautiful island for future generations. Emily Molden, who has been our resource ecologist for 15 years, happily agreed to become the executive director, and I must say that she's doing a great job. And to fill Emily's previous position as resource ecologist, the Land Council hired R.J. Turcott. Emily will briefly fill you in on R.J.'s background. The minutes of the 2018 annual meeting have been distributed. Are there any corrections? Do we have a motion to accept the minutes? Second? All in favor? Opposed? The minutes have been approved as distributed. And now I will turn over the meeting to Matt Little for the nominating committee report.
And thank you, Lucy. Good evening, everybody. My name is Matt Little. I am the chair of the Nantucket Land Council Nominating Committee. And we'll get right to it now. The committee would like to recommend the following directors for an additional, pardon me? Sorry about that. Is this much better? Whoa. Much better. Sorry about that. Dr. West, the rest of you, my name is Matt Little. I am the chair of the Nantucket Land Council Nominating Committee, and the committee would like to recommend the following directors for an additional 3-year term. Bill Brenizer, Nancy Gillespie, Nathaniel Green, Charlie Kilvert, Laurel Langworthy, Susan Robinson, and Bill Willett. Paul Moran will be stepping down from the board, and we would like to thank him and recognize him for his years of service to the Land Council. Additionally, Howard Blitman will be moving to an honorary director position, and we want to thank him especially for his long tenure as our treasurer. The nominating committee would also like to recommend Mary Randolph Ballinger and Kelty McDonald, each for 3-year terms. Mary Randolph has co-chaired the Nantucket Land Council's end-of-season dinner for the past 5 years, and Kelty has served on the host committee of the Nantucket Land Council's Friends Fet event, and we look forward to welcoming them both to the board. Now, may I please have a motion to accept the nominating committee's report? Thank you. Second? All in favor? Opposed? Thank you very much. And now I will turn the meeting over to our treasurer, Howard.
Thank you all. First of all, I'd like to report on our treasury, which is in excellent shape. And we have under, oh, good. Is that better? I'd like to report on the treasury, which is it's in excellent shape. And for the 6 months of fiscal year 2018, we ended up, our operating expenses is $454,921, which is slightly less than expected. And we have, our assets have increased to $34,307,000, which lies in an excellent position. And our liabilities are down to $33,000. And our net liabilities and net assets are $34,307,849, which I'd like to present to you for acceptance. May I have a motion of such? All those in favor? Thank you. I'm here right now to talk to you for just a moment. As I look back and I approach my 93rd year, I realize that I have spent over 40 years with the Land Council. I can remember when Carl Borchert came to my home, got a hold of me and said, "You're a fellow engineer. Let's get on to this Land Council operation." And I found out about it, and I got involved, and I loved the work I was doing. It's certainly been a wonderful period. To be on with the Land Council in excess of 40 years, I think is quite something. And we've done a great deal. So to you all, I say thank you for allowing me to be part of this, and I hope you all continue with the full strength and diligence that we have in the past. Thank you.
See if I can get this right the first time. Thank you so much, Howard. And thank you, all of you, for being here with us this evening. This year, the Nantucket Land Council is 45 years old. And our mission to protect Nantucket's environment and our water resources is more relevant today than it was even back in 1974. I'm so very proud to stand here as the 4th Executive Director of the Nantucket Land Council and to share with you some of the programs we've been involved in this past year and the incredible work that we're doing. The extent of our involvement in programs across Nantucket is quite impressive, and the far reaches of our small staff and the work that we accomplish is really quite extraordinary. Our success is ultimately due to the hard work and dedication of our Development Director, Megan Browers, and our new resource ecologist, RJ Turcott. When I stepped into the role of Executive Director back in April, we welcomed RJ to the island from another great advocacy organization called Save the Bay, just a short hop across the pond in Rhode Island. And he has embraced the Land Council's programs as his own and has become a very important part of our team. And I would certainly be remiss without thanking the entire Nantucket Land Council board and all of our membership, as you are all the foundation for the great work that we do. So thank you. The Land Council has continued to execute our mission through our 4 main programs of advocacy, land protection, education, and research. One of the things that I'm most proud of from my tenure as a resource ecologist with the Nantucket Land Council are the relationships that I established with local schools and local children and the teachers. Teachers truly are my heroes. I think that having an opportunity to work with the teachers, encouraging them to use Nantucket as a classroom with me over the years, to establish meaningful programs to engage Nantucket's youth in our local environmental issues has really been infinitely valuable. From studying the monarch's migration to our sole source aquifer or some of the other important local habitats we protect, like our beaches, our ponds, and our vernal pools, we provide not only children, but all students, including all of us, opportunities to learn about the environment in a meaningful way, and that will always be one of the Land Council's primary paths in fulfilling its mission. Our education work extends far beyond the classrooms into the community, and I've realized over the years that we all need to use the knowledge that we have to be teachers, and we all need to use the knowledge that we have to be advocates. In order to drive change, we have to provide people with the tools they need to make informed decisions. This is always going to be another huge part of our mission. This year, we hired a photographer to document the intensity of the boat use in our harbor over the summer using drones. These images are going to be an important educational tool to help us identify and address some of the impacts that our increasing use of these fragile resources are having. The Land Council also continues to attend meetings of local regulatory boards, including the Conservation Commission, the Planning Board, Zoning Board of Appeals, and Select Board. We review permit applications, we ask questions, we raise concerns, and we use our resources to hire experts to help us advocate for the best environmental protections. When necessary, we challenge decisions and we fight inappropriate development. The Land Council is currently engaged in a number of appeals associated with the Surfside Crossing 40B development. These appeals can be challenging on many fronts, but the Land Council is often the only organization in a position to take these actions. This fact was fully reinforced this past spring when the Massachusetts Department of Fish and Wildlife issued a decision determining that the Nantucket Land Council does in fact have legal standing to challenge the state's natural heritage and endangered species program's decisions. It was a clear result of all of the hard work and the time and resources that the Land Council has put into protecting endangered species on Nantucket for the last 45 years. It's not an easy position to achieve, and it's something that the Land Council is very proud of. On Tuesday of this week, I spent a very long day up in Boston at a hearing relative to this appeal. The appeal was against the Natural Heritage Endangered Species Program for a decision that they had made that this project was not going to impact some of the state's endangered species, some of the plant species, and namely the northern long-eared bat. The northern long-eared bat's population has been decimated on the mainland over the last decade, and these coastal areas such as Nantucket are one place where their population is surviving, seemingly safe from white nose syndrome. Following the hearing, one of our attorneys, John Witten, who has worked with the Land Council in a number of capacities since 1988, he works on 40B appeals across the state of Massachusetts, and he wrote to me later that evening, and he said, "Emily, my admiration for the Nantucket Land Council and what you and your predecessors have accomplished cannot be properly expressed. What an amazing story of land stewardship and advocacy." And he said, "I only wish you guys would expand your jurisdiction to the rest of the state before it is too late." And it is true that the advocacy role that we play is simply not found in most communities. But fortunately, for myself and our staff, we often fulfill our mission in other, much more enjoyable ways. The Land Council engages in a lot of scientific research in order to answer important environmental questions about our island, to support the protection of different habitats and species, and to help drive appropriate policy and land use decisions. And over the past 10 years, we've focused more and more of our research on our waters. This year, we continue to monitor the sole source aquifer with groundwater wells across the island. We've begun to supplement the town and the Land Council's existing data on our freshwater ponds with more information about harmful algae blooms, so we can begin to evaluate the impacts that these blooms are having on not only the ecosystem, but also on humans and on animals. We're also starting to look at how 2 species of river herring are using our estuarine and freshwater ponds. These fish are really important bait species, and they're definitely being decimated from overfishing in a lot of regional areas. We want to find ways that we can help to support this species here on Nantucket as it returns each year to spawn, because it's facing such serious threats. And our research will help the town to develop appropriate pond management plans for the future. We've been focusing even more of our research on our harbor environments. In 2016, our annual meeting speaker presented his updated research on the eelgrass mapping program he had begun. And the study showed us that there was major decline in our eelgrass beds in many parts of Nantucket and Nantucket harbors. Today, I'm pleased to say that this past year, we completed the first stage in a health assessment project to try to evaluate and better understand the factors that are contributing to this decline, such as the invasive European green crab, which we've been studying and sampling in Nantucket and Nantucket harbors. Next year, we intend to perform a similar health assessment of the eelgrass in Nantucket Harbor. In conjunction with this health assessment, we've also begun to evaluate a restoration technique of transplanting eelgrass from a healthy meadow over by Hussey Shoal to an area that's devoid of eelgrass, but that has the right conditions to support it. This past fall, we planted about half of an acre with eelgrass, and I'm pleased to say that over the winter, 80% of the plants did survive. We filled it out a little bit over the spring, and we intend to plant another quarter acre with eelgrass this fall. Eelgrass is the structural element that supports our entire harbor ecosystem. It provides so many important functions for us, and the Nantucket community is really starting to understand the importance of this resource. The Land Council doesn't work to improve these ecosystems on its own. We do a lot of work in conjunction with efforts by the town, other organizations, and community members so that we can begin to evaluate the factors that are influencing and affecting it. The environment is really an amazing place because it has so much resilience and adaptability built into it. In many ways, it's accustomed to dealing with change. However, with all of the human impacts in our changing climate, these resources need more and more support from us just to do what they do best, which is to survive. So the efforts of the Nantucket Land Council and of others on Nantucket, throughout New England, and around the world are all so critically important to the survival of these valuable and beautiful places. And with that, I would like to come to the part of the evening that I've been most excited about, and that is to introduce our speaker for the evening. Fabien Cousteau really needs no introduction, but I'm going to give him a short one anyway. He is the founder and president of the Ocean Learning Center. He is an aquanaut, an explorer, adventurer, an ocean conservationist, and a scientist. He is a teacher, and he is an advocate. He spends his time working on a global scale to bring people's attention to the importance of conserving these habitats and these places that we all need and care about. So it is truly an honor to have him here with us tonight. So I'd ask you to help me give a very warm welcome to Fabien Cousteau.
Merci tout le monde. Merci, merci. Voilà. Alors, ce soir, de quoi on parle? Oh, I'm sorry. I want to say first and foremost, thank you all so very much for having me here tonight. I'm humbled by all the things that you have obviously been doing here. May I suggest one thing? That instead of calling yourselves the Nantucket Land Council, that you call yourselves the Nantucket Land and Sea Councils because of all the work you're doing on that beautiful part of this place that's also water. Now, as I'm alluding to, we are all connected by water. It may not come as much of a surprise to this very affluent group of knowledgeable people, but the vast majority of communities around the world are, let's say, ignorant of that fact, at least in the conscious sense. If you take all of modern day ocean exploration to date, we've explored less than 5% of our ocean world. But if you look at our planet, And I apologize to the educators in the group. I was never a very good student, and I certainly didn't wait for my turn to speak, so I got in trouble a lot. But when we talk about the surface of the planet being 72 or 73% of the planet, it's a bit of a misnomer because we're not thinking in 3 dimensions. If you think about our planet as a living space within which we all share this communal space, this communal living space with other sentient beings, the ocean represents almost 99% of our world's living space, 3.4 billion cubic kilometers of volume. And within that ecosystem, about 73 to 78% of our world's biodiversity lives and thrives. Why is this so important? Because we're beholden to the health of that ecosystem, of those other animals, those creatures, both plant and animal, that allow for us to exist and thrive. Every other breath that you've taken tonight is thanks to the ocean. And yet, we know almost nothing about it. For me, that's a great joy to say because it gives some sense of job security. But at the end of the day, we need to know much, much more about our ocean world. How many of you recognize this gentleman? Thank you. I meant the one in the middle, not the one with the funny shorts. Yes, Jacques-Yves Cousteau, and he was my grandfather, as was alluded to. And yes, he was, of course, a pioneer, an out-of-the-box thinker, and someone who really was passionate about storytelling. And before he became an ocean explorer, he was first and foremost one that wanted to share stories with the world, a filmmaker. And when he pierced that blue veneer for the very first time with some of his best friends, Frédéric Dumas and Capitaine Taillez, his eyes were open to that undersea world. And he dedicated his life, and my grandmother, Simone Cousteau, dedicated her life to sharing that with the rest of the world for the rest of their lives, for over 50 years. Now, lest you think that that was my only influence growing up, I was also influenced by a number of factors. First of all, I was brutally thrown in the pool at 4 years old to learn to scuba dive. I'm actually being facetious here. We have some crazy friends in our family. One of our friends on my 4th birthday was reading the newspaper at the bottom of the pool on scuba. And as a 4-year-old, not knowing any better, I was curious, so I dove in to go see what he was doing. And he subsequently started sharing air with me, buddy breathing. And that gave me a love and appreciation for that freedom that one gets from breaking the bonds of gravity to be able to explore the undersea world. And shortly thereafter, I was afforded a small scuba tank and a regulator with what they called a suicide strap then, not a very good name for it. And that was my love started thanks to the previous generations. And from 7 years on, I was enlisted. I think that's called indentured servitude or maybe child slavery. But I was enlisted on the Calypso as a crew member. And being so ripe in age, I got to scrub the barnacles off the hull for the summer and worked my way up to painting the rails, and then, of course, the graveyard shift at the helm, and eventually got to be anointed as one of the scuba divers within the ship Calypso. I must say that we are blessed tonight also, and I feel very humbled tonight that we are sharing the space with another Calypso diver, Clay, right there, Clay Wilcox, a good friend of ours. I didn't mean to call you out, Clay, but I just saw you. Thank you for coming. And a few other friends in the group as well tonight. But I wanted to say those were very special moments and formative years for myself. But I wasn't influenced only by my grandparents. Sometimes I was also a typical kid partaking in some of these kinds of readings, the Tintin, Trésor d'Or comme le Rouge, and that gave me crazy ideas like building shark-shaped submarines. I have a feeling you guys may be familiar with that animal. I'm not sure. This is a great white shark, and I've always been a big proponent and have always been bolstered by avant-garde thinkers, people who don't take the impossible as an obstacle, but more as a challenge. To think outside the box, to learn more about our ecosystem, to push longer, deeper, and further than our comfortable little box that we live in, to learn about amazing creatures such as the great white shark. This ended up on CBS Primetime as a movie called Mind of a Demon, where I go and swim with great white sharks in a shark-shaped submarine, just like Tintin. But the reason for it was really more about learning what these animals do when we're not around and shed the fireworks display and sometimes the fallacies and misnomers of these mindless killing machines, and really understand more about their essential part of that ecosystem and why we need to protect them, not so much because we need to love them, although that's fantastic if you do, but really because they perform a vital role in that ecosystem for over 400 million years. And you're blessed, I say this in quotations, to have a reoccurring population here in this general aquatic neighborhood. And I unfortunately scratched my cornea, so I apologize if I can't see you. You're all kind of fuzzy on this side. But I wanted to go diving with them this weekend, and I'm going to have to forego that this time around. But I look forward to doing that some other time if you'll have me again. But diving with some of these iconic creatures, of course, gives a better perspective of what we share and how we share these resources with this planet. This is, of course, a humpback whale. Again, another animal you might be familiar with in this neck of the woods. Humpback whales, or cetaceans in general, have something we share, which is the mammalian reflex. Something that allows for us when we submerge ourselves, and specifically our receptors in our face, to slow our heart rate down, slow our consumption of oxygen down, presumably to go down and stay down longer underwater. For them, of course, it's life and death, it's to go forage. And in the case of this lovely animal, as she's sleeping with half of her brain, she's also keeping an eye out for the 5 suitors that are waiting for her to wake up so they can chase her and bump each other out of the way to be the next champion of her prodigy. Is that PC enough? Okay. I never know. I'm looking around, I see young and young at heart, but I wanted to make sure there's no underage kids before I start getting into the details of some of these things. So one of the other blessings was to be able to go into the Amazon River 25 years after my grandfather did, and frolic with these lovely animals, the caimans and many others, like anacondas, piranhas, and all sorts of creatures that we love to go, ugh, on television. Partly our fault as storytellers, but we need to bring that audience in that aren't necessarily conservationists so that we can infuse them with the information and the science that they really need to understand. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. And what was wonderful about this is having been there as a young kid, a 12-year-old in 1980 and 81, now you know my age, and going back 25 years later with my father and my sister and our crew to go and see what has changed in the greater Amazon basin. Just for a point of reference, the Amazon has enough water flow to fill Lake Michigan in 20 minutes. There's an island in the mouth of the Amazon that's the size of Switzerland. It is an enormous place, and yet, as you've probably read or seen on television or online many times, there are a lot of stresses that are happening in that area. And what's happening upstream is also affecting the water bodies in the immediate saline waters. But again, I digress. Something that I was very driven to do, and I was told was impossible, was a dream I had, something that I was born too late to do. When my grandfather had built the first underwater habitats, or houses underwater, to see if people could live and work underwater for extended periods of time in the early 1960s. I had missed that boat, of course, because I was born later than that, but I always dreamt about becoming an aquanaut. And an aquanaut is like an astronaut just underwater. And by that I mean that instead of building a space station in space to live and work out of, you build a space station underwater, or a scientific research station. How cool is that? And I did a little bit of research, and I was lucky enough to visit a family friend of ours, Dr. Sylvia Earle, who's probably visited you several times here. And she was trying to save the last remaining undersea habitat called Aquarius. And so I went to visit her during her 5-day stay down there to pick it and make sure that NOAA didn't scrap that last vestige of underwater habitats. And I fell in love. Unfortunately, just like many scuba divers, I am eternally frustrated with the limit of time at the bottom of the sea. Because you are blessed as a scuba diver to be able to peek under that blue veneer and immerse yourself in an alien environment and see things and experience things and be part of things that most people will never get a chance to see and experience firsthand. And yet, when things start getting really interesting, the time has run out, your air is running low, and you need to go back to the surface. What better way to flip reality on its head and instead to get completely saturated and immersed in your environment and live in a habitat? And that's something I want to share with you, because a few years ago, I got my wish. Despite a lot of people saying it was impossible, and thanks to the fact that that habitat was still in existence, I got a chance to recruit 5 other crazy people like myself and to live in a glorious 560 square feet of internal space, to live and work for 31 days at the bottom of the sea. So with this, I'd like to share the video.
I want you to meet Captain Jacques-Yves Cousteau, the world's foremost underwater explorer.
Once upon a time, my grandfather believed that man could live and work beneath the waves. We began to look at the ocean differently. He inspired me and generations to explore the human-ocean connection. It was a whole new world, a world without sun. And in 1964, he lived and worked for 30 days on the ocean floor. But then something happened. We lost our way. Countless frontiers unexplored. Oceans that need our help more than ever. It's time for a reboot to re-spark the human-ocean connection. My name is Fabien Cousteau. Join me and my crew on a journey to Aquarius, the last undersea habitat, and prove that there is a future for us beneath the waves.
I mean, how could you not want to do that? So, I make light of it. I mean, there were a lot of challenges, and just like training to be an astronaut, becoming a saturation diver, and living and working out of the world's only undersea marine laboratory for 31 days was certainly not without its challenges. When we were based out of a 25-year-old structure that was never meant to last that long, things like the chiller or the air conditioning going out and having the internal temperatures going up to 95 degrees and over 100% humidity make things rather impossible. And luckily, or not impossible, very, very difficult to work. Luckily, we got these things fixed as we went on. And although the folks at Mission Control thought that we were never going to make it, because previous to us, the longest ever stay at Aquarius was 18 days by NASA. We were still able to not only go surpass that, but show that with enough will and enough ingenuity, we are able to circumvent some of these issues. But more importantly than that, it gave me the realization that there's a very real need for underwater habitats in the future for mid and long-term studies of all the things that we need to understand of our world's barometer, our life support system, the ocean. And so it's not about staying inside the habitat that's important. That you can leave to submarines. It's the access that the habitat gives you to going outside 10 to 12 hours a day or longer per person. So with us for Mission 31, and thanks to all the support that we got from our research teams at FIU, at Northeastern University, at MIT, that all that surface support that was allotted to us from the Navy and all those other entities and the supporters, we were able to execute over 3 years worth of scientific research in those 31 days. The efficiency quotient is through the roof. And so it puzzles me that today, this is the last remaining undersea research station. Now, there are rumors that overseas, they may be thinking about doing something. There are plans 10, 12, 15 years down the road for the US Navy and others to build the next underwater stations. But we don't have that time. We are up against some monumental challenges. And although we were able to use amazing technologies like the pulse amplitude modulated fluorometer, which was that little piece of kit that you saw us testing the coral reefs with to see about all sorts of consumption rates and fluorescence. And it's really about being down there and gathering that data, gathering as much data and crunching it in real time as possible. It's also about being able to connect with that ecosystem in ways that we simply aren't afforded from ROVs, AUVs, submersibles, boats, and so on and so forth. All of these are arrows in our quiver to tackle the problems that we are facing. Now, what is the future of underwater habitats? I don't know. Maybe you'll have to wait until October to find out. But until then, we need to think about all the things that challenge us, because at the end of the day, what you all are doing is of paramount importance. And I'm not saying this in a trite way. How do you fill a bucket? One drop at a time. And when I speak to groups who are not as proactive as you, a lot of times there's despair because of all the bad news. Bad news about climate change, I think something you may have heard of. Bad news about the way we're treating our ecosystem, our failing web of life, the things that are happening to apex predators, such as orcas, the endocrine disruptors that they're ingesting through the same food systems that we all are dependent on, that we're eating, the Chinook salmon, for example, that are ingesting plastics and chemicals, are creating disruptions in their families that are creating spontaneous abortions, learning and behavioral disabilities in their calves, sterility, and so on and so forth. All sorts of really not uplifting news. But we need to pay more attention. Well, we'll skip that slide. You know all about plastics. But let's take plastics, for example. We dump over 300 million tons of plastic in our ocean every year. Virtually every piece of plastic that's ever been manufactured since the early 1900s still exists today. And guess where it is? 80% of it is in the ocean. So it's something that we really need to understand and recalibrate. When it washes up on shore, of course, we pay attention. But that's just the stuff that floats and gets to us. Most of it ends up at the bottom of the sea. This is the way we're treating our life support system, like an endless resource and a garbage can. And I, for one, cannot stand for that. So although I am an ocean explorer, I am an adventurer, a filmmaker, whatever you want to call me, troublemaker sometimes. It's really more about all of us becoming conservationists. Not so much because we want to hug whales and dolphins and all that, but because we have a vested interest in our own well-being and in the well-being of our children. And by default, we have to take care of the rest of the sentient beings on this planet. It's about redefining value. And I'm not going to bash you over the head about the SDGs. It's not important for tonight. But it all comes back to one thing: the circulatory system of all life. When you ask an astronaut, what is the one thing that they look for when they're trying and dreaming about colonizing Mars or Europa? It's water. Without water, we don't exist. Without clean water, we don't have a healthy future. And with that, although I am an ocean explorer, I wanted to be able to do a give back on my end, to be a volunteer in being proactive and trying to connect communities to doing better and more so that we can give back to our future generations what we've taken for granted. And the Ocean Learning Center breaks our different programs down into three basic categories. The C category, which is public awareness, such as sometimes bringing down, we have competitions and we'll bring down a lucky student who's an aspiring marine biologist or someone who's interested in science or very good at it to go down in a submersible, to go down 1,000 feet or more, to go check things out. And then they can be the spokesperson for their kin, their peers, to inspire them. To go and get young people, especially at-risk communities, to go out there and mingle with that ecosystem, to really get infused with this. And this is something you all obviously know very well and have done so well in your community for over 4 decades. But we need to inspire our neighbors to do the same. Learning is an integral part of this process. Without the proper information, the proper tools, we cannot make the proper decisions. Being able to understand why mangroves in tropical and subtropical areas are so vitally important and why we need to stop cutting down those beautiful places that are also our protectors on those coastal areas. And of course, something that I am going to have the great pleasure of participating in with all of you tomorrow, I hope all of you tomorrow, a beach cleanup, which is not only an act of reverence towards our life support system, but it's also one of community connection and understanding. And then the do projects. Giving back to our planet's ecosystem. Not only creating marine protected areas, just like we do on land with national parks, but also restoring those things that we've damaged. Being able to engage local communities far and wide, to give back and to be part of that solution, to, for example, release baby sea turtles in Nicaragua, such as our Women's Empowerment Program there, or to plant mangroves or eelgrass, is of vital importance. And integrating and infusing technology so that young people, so there's this young gentleman right here, can be interested in being part of that solution, to 3D print coral structures so that you can print coral reefs and restore those amazing ecosystems of which 70% or more of ocean life depends on at some stage in their lives. We're now quite capable of creating coral reefs through 3D printing. And that's a pretty fun thing to do with young people. At the end of the day, it boils down to one thing that I remember my grandfather telling me very vividly, and it is our mantra at the Ocean Learning Center. People protect what they love. They love what they understand, and they understand what they are taught. And we are big believers in banding together, using each other's strengths as individuals, as communities, as NGOs, as bodies of people who can make a difference and can change the course that we've set for ourselves. So with that, I've talked long enough. I just wanted to thank you all so very much for allowing me to be part of your community for this weekend. And I commend you and encourage you to keep doing what you're doing. Fight the good fight. We will make a difference, and we will get out of the mess that we've created. Thank you all very much. Have a good night.
Thank you so much, Fabian, for those stories and inspirations tonight. That's really valuable for our community. While I have all of your attention, I just want to, again, expand upon the little tidbits you heard about our upcoming programs for the next few days. We are so fortunate to not just be able to hear from Fabian this evening, but as he said, he will be joining us tomorrow with the Ocean Learning Center and the Land Council in collaboration with the Nantucket Clean Team, with Strong Wings, the Mariah Mitchell Association, and others for a beach cleanup at 9:30 out at Surfside Beach. We will have the town of Nantucket there. Their DPW will help us with everything we collect. So please, if you have some time tomorrow morning, come and join us. It is bound to be a good time. We also will be having a special program on Saturday morning, planting eelgrass out at our eelgrass transplant site on Monomoy Beach. We do ask that you pre-register for that activity just so that we can get you all the information you need. So you can email nlc@nantucketlandcouncil.org or contact Meg or I after the talk tonight to get some more information on that. I don't know, Fabian, if you would take a question or two, if folks have them, if we have a moment. If anyone would like to ask a question, I'd love to invite you to at this time.
Yes, hi.
Receptive are the nations of the Western Asia Pacific to the kinds of concerns that you're raising tonight?
Yeah, no, how receptive are the Western Pacific nations, is that what you're saying? So the Asian Pacific ring and everything. By and large, receptive when approached in a way that is not aggressive, in a way that is more about storytelling, in a way that is more about peers talking to each other. And most importantly, I've found that depending on the communities, many of those communities have no idea what's going on in the ocean. And that's not just relegated to the Asian Pacific area. It's pretty much universal, planetary anyway. And to me, what's important is to try and connect with people in a way that is not only engaging, but impassioning. A lot of communities are faced with stark realities that they have to feed their families, they have to keep a roof over their heads, and they're struggling to make any of those things happen. And when it comes time to making the right choice, even if they have that information, or feeding their families, they're going to sacrifice the right choice in order to put food on the table for that day, or to be able to afford a hospital bill, or to be able to have a roof. And I've found more often than not that an approach that works, that seems to work, is when we have those discussions, have that exchange of knowledge and information, and then come up with a solution that addresses not only the environmental aspect of things, but also their very real need. If I don't know how much time I have, but I'll make it very short. We had a program that's now graduated from El Salvador to Nicaragua, but we had a program in El Salvador for sea turtle restoration, which was engaging about 800 fishermen, 3 villages on the coast of El Salvador, the most disadvantaged of El Salvador. And the reason why they were poaching sea turtle eggs and selling it to the black market and quite literally risking getting thrown in jail was because they had no choice. They had to do that in order to feed their families. And so we stepped in seeing the problem, sat down with the elders and with the village chiefs, and explained what the value of sea turtles are long term. And they explained to us that for 12 years, and scientists did as well from the data, that there was 0 recruitment rate of baby sea turtles of the 5 endangered species on that coast because they were so good at finding the sea turtle, tracking the turtles at night, finding the nests, gathering the eggs, and selling them to the market. And we said, wow, that's a really amazing skill. So instead of vilifying them and throwing them in jail, we employed them at a little bit less than what they would get than black market, but they weren't going to get thrown in jail. And we employed them to go and collect those sea turtle eggs, bring them back to pens that they built, that they protected from domestic predators and from poachers and so on and so forth. And in 3 years, those same 800 people that were now protecting 34 kilometers of coast, their own aquatic backyard, released over 750,000 baby sea turtles from those 5 endangered species. All the while, we're training them in alternate sources of income. Crafts, hospitality, guides, cottage industry, so on and so forth, so that they never ever have to rely on sales of sea turtle eggs to the black market again. And after 5 years, we were able to step away and give them the management of those programs. And I'm happy to say that they are now the champions of those sea turtles in that area. So there are solutions, we just have to think outside the box. Yes, sir.
Every time I see pictures of the amount of trash, and plastic particularly, it scares me. It scares me because everybody says, look at this. I've never seen anybody say, what are we going to do?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And we acknowledge that there's a problem. Obviously, the visuals are very shocking in many ways. It's animals being strangled, and the reality is that we're now at a stage where we're eating our own garbage, quite literally. And I don't mean to be, I'm not being facetious. Almost 50% of the fish that you find in the supermarket and the restaurant has microplastics in it. So we're eating our own garbage, literally. And that's a really big problem. Beach cleanups are great. We need to continue doing that by all means. But we need to stop the problem at its source. And there are a lot of ways to do that. And as I mentioned before, it's like filling the bucket one drop at a time. The average consumer in the United States, in North America, consumes over 8 single-use pieces of plastic in their everyday lives. Imagine if this community, and I'm sure you're already doing a lot, were to eliminate one of those single-use plastics in each and every one of our everyday lives. Imagine if we all did that in North America, how much of a positive impact that would have. We're 5% of the world's population that's consuming over 20% of the world's resources. We have a huge say and a huge impact. And if we lead the way in this proactive movement, then the rest of the world will see this and will want to follow. We can't point fingers if we're the culprits. At the end of the day, it's much more beneficial and much more empowering to be the leaders of these solutions than to look for other people to lead. That's my 2 cents. Yes, sir.
Have you been able to do research around a offshore wind farm
That's a hot topic around here, isn't it? I don't know if I want to touch that one. I may get lynched. I'm all for alternative energies. I'm a big fan of hybridizing grids because then you're not dependent on one type or another of energy. So that makes it even more robust of a system that you can depend on for energy. Wind, solar, those peak energies are also are all very valuable, obviously. Offshore has its advantages and disadvantages. Of course, they're not particularly attractive, but you talk to the Swedish and the Norwegians and all that, and they have a lot of wind farms on land and off land, and they don't seem to mind. As far as the ecosystem is concerned and migratory patterns of animals, I haven't seen any conclusive evidence that it's negatively impacting too many animals. As far as the avian species, you have to be careful of the blade speeds and everything else. That's not for me to judge because I don't live here. That's for the community, of course, to decide what kinds of renewable energies they would like. But I would say, everything done properly can be of benefit, and if done improperly, it's a big mistake that's very costly to fix down the road. I'm personally not against it, but it has to be done right. I don't particularly like the looks of them, but yeah, it's much better than a big giant puddle of sludge in the ocean. And I've seen way too much of that. I love OTEC, I love all sorts of other energies as well. The problem with peak energies is that you need a storage medium, or you need to hybridize it with something else. And storage mediums are costly. That's another disposal issue, and because you have to, the storage mediums typically you have to renew or recycle. So another issue to think about. But I'm far be it for me to judge what's happening here. Yes, sir.
There are a number of organizations concerned with ocean health. Do you cooperate with any of them, either in projects or as fundraising strategies or anything like that?
As often as possible. I kind of glanced over that very quickly, and the Ocean Learning Center is one aspect. As an individual, yes, we were just talking to river keepers actually about that, and others. There's only 24 hours in the day, but I try and spread that 24 hours into as much of a positive impact as possible. And so if there are opportunities as an individual to partner or to work with other entities that are doing good for our planet on various levels, that makes sense, absolutely. And with organizations, the OLC and other organizations partnering, we do that all the time, because as a small entity, we certainly can't do it all. We certainly can't be effective because we're stretched too thin. And so when we can work with other people's strengths and we can offer our strengths and working with a communal budget, it makes a much bigger cumulative impact. Absolutely, I'm a big believer in that. Yes, ma'am.
Where is your underwater research station?
Well, it's not mine.
I know.
It now belongs to, so NOAA sold it to FIU. And it's 9 miles offshore of the Florida coast, 20,000 millimeters under the sea. 60 feet, 65 feet. I did not place it there. It has been there for many years. And I will say that Aquarius is long in the tooth, and that's to put it mildly. I'm sad to say that there's none other that I know of. Yes, commercial divers use dive bells and glorified, I won't call them habitats, but they're refuge vessels that they use for oil exploration mainly and maintenance. So they'll use that for DSAT. But as far as habitats for scientific research, there is none other that I know of. Unless it's classified, and usually I kind of get rumors, but I haven't heard anything. I know the Chinese are building a 1 atmosphere habitat deep, but that's not technically for the kind of research we're talking about. I don't think I want to expand too much on that. But it's way time. It's way overdue. And the habitat we're talking about, with today's technology and engineering, we can make something that is so state-of-the-art, that is so modular, so future-proof, that we can easily see a 12 to 15-year shelf life in a brand new, amazing inner space station. And it would benefit not only the individuals and organizations that use it as a research lab, but the world, because of all the data that would come out of it, and everything from biochemistry, so curing issues that ail us, like cancer, like malaria, and so on and so forth. For example, I'll give you one quick example. You all probably know what the cone snail is. And there's a whole family of cone snails, and they're very, very venomous. And the venom from the cone snail dart is now being synthesized because they found out that the venom itself is a potential replacement for morphine. And it's 1,000 times more effective than morphine, and yet has no side effects of addiction. The only problem right now is how to cost-effectively use it for patients that are chronically ill, chronically in pain. But there are all sorts of discoveries that are happening in the ocean, because, as I said, there's only 5% that's been explored. And so there's a lot of amazing research and data that's coming out of this, not just for pharmaceuticals, but for biomechanics, so robots, things like that, anecdotes for space exploration. Before you become an astronaut, you first have to become a scuba diver. And of course, the ones that are going to go live in space typically use Aquarius or the Neutral Buoyancy Lab for their training before they go and live in the space station. So it's not without its risks, don't get me wrong, but actually, if you're talking about extreme environments, I would arguably say that undersea is probably more extreme than zero gravity and zero atmosphere. Yes, ma'am.
Because you're an education entity, I have two daughters who grew up here. We did not teach oceanography in school. We have the opportunity because we have nonprofits and dedicated scientists on island who are involved in wanting to educate children, but it's like that all over the country. Oceanography is like the vision of our science.
Yes, yes. We spend 160 times more in space exploration in North America, in the United States specifically, than in ocean exploration.
The second part of this, when I was a girl, it was the Calypso law.
Yes.
That's on TV. I have 5 brothers, and the 6 of us sat and watched. And my brothers learned how to swim dive. We eventually got masks like snorkels. It was just really exciting. Can we have not Hollywood, but something real
Yes.
distinct to offer young people today on that level?
Well, thank you for that. That's always a blessing to be able to hear people who remember my grandfather's and his crew's series, Sunday nights, 8 p.m., The Undersea World of Jacques Cousteau. Can we do that? Yeah, I think it's absolutely possible. And today's world is a bit different in the sense that now we have a lot of different kinds of media to wrestle with as filmmakers, as storytellers, to try and not only make the budget happen, because these things are expensive. Expeditions are not cheap. People think that you can go out with a GoPro and make a wonderful IMAX documentary, but it's unfortunately not the case. But provided you can get a budget up, you also have to be able to better define your target market. And whether it's online, that's a certain type of media. If it's on television, it's another type of media, and of course the big screen. I'm a big fan of big screen because you get immersed, you have to turn your phones off, and for 45 minutes or an hour or 2 or hour and a half, you have the person's attention. But, most people consume media online nowadays, 3-minute increments, maybe 15. Sometimes they go to, Netflix or whatever to get a series. And we are looking at that. The challenge is obviously always getting funded to do that. The second aspect is I'm seeing it now, we're just getting out of this reality TV craze in a way that, and I'll be quite honest, my grandfather's television series was reality TV before reality TV was what it is now. It was real reality TV. Now it's scripted reality. And I'm seeing a slight change in the appetite of the public, luckily, because of what we're facing, to get more to more in-depth content, more documentary, less pure entertainment and more entertainment with substance. And so it gives me hope that, yes, we might be able to get back to a semblance of offering a television series or an online series, or hopefully both, that will be in some ways reminiscent of the undersea world, and in other ways energizing and engaging to a young audience. Yes, sir.
It's been so long since I studied it, but are there any big changes that you perceive may be coming in undersea human respiratory physiology, so that when you go down there, you can do more and better?
Well, you're from MIT. You're a graduate from MIT, aren't you? I'm looking to you for that answer. Liquid breathing. Liquid breathing hasn't been perfected yet. It's still, for the most part, a one-way trip, from what I understand. I long for the day where we can tackle that. Right now, our limits as far as saturation diving are about 1,000 feet or so, a little more maybe. It's not for any extended period of time. I know the navies have had a lot of trials with this, with human subjects. Unfortunately, some didn't end up so well. So I don't have an answer for you. I know that there are certain dark groups that are working on these things, but because they're so high risk, they're not public. I don't have the keys to that, unfortunately. I wish I did. I'd be the first one to jump on board. But I very much look forward to that. We're still playing with the age-old, the rebreathers and the mixed gases and everything else. But human physiology is a very tricky thing, as you know. As you know, that was one of the things I think you and I were talking about before. But I look forward to that day, for sure. We need people like you to help us. There was one, yes, ma'am. Sorry.
Physical location for your learning center?
I'm sorry?
Do you have a physical location for your learning
Yes, I do. As a matter of fact, we have a couple of Ocean Learning Center people in the audience tonight. I think, I don't see you, Justin, who's actually, there he is right there. I'm sorry, it's my fuzzy eye. Justin's up against the light, and that definitely gets me. So Justin is actually, should I call you a local? You're a part-time local? I don't know. You've been here for many, many decades. Your family has. So Justin Green, Zoe here, and a few others, but we're all based in our corporate office in New York City. But the programs are a little bit everywhere, scattered around the world. We're participating in the beach cleanup here. We have another one on Long Island, one in Florida that's coming, or no, I'm sorry, that's a restoration program. But we try and spread ourselves as much as possible and work with others as much as possible. But our physical location when I'm not in the air somewhere is in New York City. It's where I get yelled at all the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you all so much again. And just as a quick reminder, last October, Nantucket did pass a new bylaw banning certain single-use plastics. It will be implemented June 1st of 2020, so we are on the right track. But in the meantime, while they are all still floating around out there, I hope to see you at 9:30 tomorrow morning at Surfside to help us pick them up. And in the meantime, I hope you'll all stay and join us for a drink and some conversation afterwards. Thank you.